Hi everyone, it's Jennifer Hoffman of EnlighteningLife.com hang on, let me get my camera straight here. And this is the Enlightening Life newsletter for January 15th, 2018. And I'm going to do a little video. I wanted to switch out sometimes doing videos and doing written newsletters because I like the contact with you, and I like to be able to talk sometimes in ways that are more descriptive. And I think this topic for this week's newsletter is quite important, and I really wanted to share some things with you. So the topic for this week is spiritual shaming. Now, I wrote an article about spiritual shaming about a year ago, and the link is on this page. But the bigger issue that I want to talk about with spiritual shaming is something that I'm seeing in the spiritual community that I think is very troubling, and I wanted to address it. So what is spiritual shaming? Well, it is when someone tells you you're not spiritual, or they question or they judge your level of spiritual awareness or spirituality, usually because you don't do something for them, or you don't do something that they expect, or they have an opinion about you and something you're doing. Now, I've been called not spiritual by a number of people for a number of different things, and I'll elaborate on that in this video as well, as to give you some examples. But the problem with spiritual shaming is, first of all, your level of spirituality is really none of anybody else's business, because it's a matter between you and Source, and it doesn't involve anybody else. While we are all on a collective journey of ascension, each of us has our own very specific individual path. And our path depends on the karmic lessons we're here to resolve, the soul group we're here to work with, the lessons we're here to learn, and that is unique to every single person. Every single person has a different lesson, and every single person approaches that lesson in different ways, and they complete it in different ways. And nobody can be the judge of anybody else's level of spirituality, because they can't possibly know what that journey is. It's very personal, and it's very unique, and it really doesn't reflect on anybody else. So what do you do when someone shames you spiritually? Well, let's look at your side. So you are doing things that are right for you, that you feel are the best for your path, and someone says, you're wrong, you shouldn't be doing that, and I think that this is the wrong thing to do, and what's wrong with you. Notice I use the word wrong a lot, because it's really about making you wrong and making them right. But it's really a judgment of what they think you should be doing, or should be saying, or should be how you should be acting based on what they have defined spirituality to be. Now, the big problem with that is that there is no definition of spirituality. It's very unique. We're in this integration process, so there's really no way for anyone to say, well, you're spiritual or you're not spiritual. And as I've talked about the veil being gone, so the veil between the spiritual and the material world is gone, but we have personal veils, and our personal veils need to come down as well. And that personal veil is the one that describes the spiritual world here and the material world here. And if you're not in the spiritual world, then you're in the material world, and that's bad. Remember, this is a journey of integration. We are integrating 3D and 5D. And that is the whole ascension journey. It's a journey of integration. Now, because we call it ascension, we think we're rising up. We're coming up beyond everything. We're going to go off to heaven somewhere, or some magical spiritual place. And that just isn't true. Remember, we're creating heaven on earth. So when somebody questions your spirituality, and this generally happens because you don't do something for them, or you don't do something that they expect, or say something they expect within their definition of spirituality, then they shame you. They tell you that you're not spiritual. And for you, it can be, depending on who says it, it can be quite a blow. You can feel really bad about it. But as I said before, it's really none of anybody's business how spiritual you are, or what your spirituality is, or what you do, or how you act in the confines of your spiritual journey. So you can pretty much kind of let them know it's really none of their business, and they need to move on. So let me give you an example, and I have written this example in this particular article because it is what actually prompted me to write the article. So if somebody had contacted me and asked me for some business advice. Now, I do teach business. It's part of my overall business, and I teach business because I know a lot about business. I have 3 business degrees, and I have more than 20 years of corporate experience in a wide range of industries, and I run my own business for 15 years very successfully. So I decided to teach business. Well, this is my job. This is not a hobby. I earn my money this way. So if somebody wants business advice, then they need to take my business course. And this person had asked me a question, and the answer wasn't a simple yes or no. It was more complicated of an answer. So I wrote back and I said, thanks for asking me, but I have a course that teaches that. Why don't you take my course? And the person immediately wrote back and said, oh, well, my guides told me to contact you, and you're not answering my question. So you're not very spiritual because you aren't answering me. And this gets into, of course, the whole thing about, as many of you know, if you're spiritual, you have these talents, they're God-given, you're supposed to share them with the world, which is something I also talk about in my intuition program, which is not. Your spirituality is your gift to source. So you being a light is your gift to source. And that's something you need to remember when someone tries to shame you spiritually, is you volunteered to be here. You use your talents and your gifts and all of your abilities in ways that serve the light. So there's really not, it's not about you being given this talent and then you're supposed to just shower it on the world. This is something that you can do, just like some people are great at painting or drawing or music or any number of things, and other people aren't quite as good at that, or they're not good at those things at all. So this person said, you're not very spiritual, and I thought, well, okay, if that's how you want to judge me, then fine, but I'm still not going to give you the information. You're welcome to take my course. And I just thought, this is kind of an interesting thing, because this person would define themselves as spiritual. So why were they judging me? And I've been doing this a long time, so I've been working with Uriel and channeling and writing since early 2004. So I have come across this several times, and it doesn't bother me as much as it used to, but I know that it's a source of discomfort for a lot of people, but it also is a very bad reflection on the spiritual community. And as I said earlier, our personal veils need to come down. We need to stop looking at the spiritual and the material world as 2 different places, because we are integrating those energies. So another very recent example of this is when somebody wrote to me and said, I'm unfollowing you and unfriending you because of your position on a certain issue. And I thought, well, okay, so fine. Obviously, they felt the need to tell me that they were doing this. But on another level, again, this is part of my spiritual path. And how can they judge my level of spirituality simply because I say things they don't like, or I am doing something that they don't approve of, that really has nothing to do with my spirituality or theirs, and it has nothing to do with anything, because again, there is no standard. And now something we also need to realize about this is there's no spiritual standard. There's no one way to do things. There's no one way to be spiritual. There's no one way to walk the spiritual path. There is the way that aligns with your journey and your lessons and your soul mission and your life purpose, and it all fits together. But it all fits together in your life, and then it fits together and in the whole piece, the whole puzzle of this entire ascension journey that all of humanity is on. Each of us walks that collective journey, but our path is very unique and very individual. So for someone to question my spirituality or yours based on their standard is simply ridiculous, and it doesn't mean anything. And as I said before, it's really none of their business. So what do you do to avoid spiritual shaming? Well, first of all, you really can't avoid it. People are going to have opinions and judgments and criticisms about anything you do. And the more public you become, the greater their level of judgment. But you can tell them, and this is true, that it's really not their business, that whatever your level of spirituality is between you and Source, and it doesn't involve them. But also remember that, as I said, there is no standard. There is no one way to do things. There are many, many different paths, and each of them is important, and so is yours. So the idea that someone could shame you because of your spiritual beliefs or because of something you say and they don't agree with it is patently ridiculous. But the more troublesome aspect of this is happening within the spiritual community. Now, we're supposed to be light beacons. We're supposed to be lighting the path. We're supposed to be, big energy containers and creating all this movement and being the source of the life for that movement. And how do we do that when we're arguing with each other and judging and criticizing each other? And this is where it's not a good use of our time and energy. It's not a good use of our resources to be judging each other. And the more that someone judges you, and I have found this to be true in many different ways, it really speaks more of their own spiritual journey and their own, I want to say, spiritual immaturity. And often this comes from jealousy as well, which is a terrible thing to have to talk about. And I don't like the topic of jealousy because it's such a negative emotion. But because people think there's a standard and there's one way to do things, and some people want to assert their spiritual superiority, so they will tell you that they're above you, or they're faster than you are, or they've already been there. And I've seen this happen with people, and this really annoys me because it assumes that there's a path and there are steps on the path and they're 10 steps ahead of you. When there is a path, nobody is ahead of anybody else, and everybody is exactly where they need to be and where they can be. And to think otherwise is just it's not right. There is no, we have to get to an end and here's the finish line. This is not a marathon, so there isn't a finish line and the first person who crosses it wins the prize. It's, again, our individual path, our collective journey, and wherever you are is where you need to be. And for someone to want to tell you that I'm in the 12th dimension, or I'm in the 9th dimension, or I've already done these things, it doesn't even mean anything because they're not on your path, they're not part of your journey, and they couldn't possibly know what's going on with you. And I find that people who do that need to assert their superiority in some way. They need to show you that they're better than you are, they're more accomplished, or they're more advanced, which only serves to make other people feel bad. It's not a contest. Spirituality, the spiritual journey, the whole ascension cycle, the 3D, 5D integration is not a contest. It's a journey. So when people try and shame you spiritually because they want to feel better about themselves, or they think you're wrong, or they don't agree with you in some way, don't let that bother you. Don't let it be part of your path where you invite people that way, but also don't let it stop you, and don't let it slow you down. As I said, the troubling thing about that is it's happening within the spiritual community with people who are supposed to be spiritual. So here we're going to achieve another level of awareness, which we're already doing, and that awareness then brings in a new level of connection and community. And for some people, that is another way for them to see more of a separation and more disagreement and more trying to find their place on that path, when there really is only one place, and that is wherever you are in that moment. So spiritual shaming is a big problem, and it's a big issue, and it's one that if you are already not confident about what you're doing, can make you feel really bad and can really slow you down. And please don't let it do that, because the person who's shaming you, the person who's criticizing and judging you, really speaks more about themselves and their own lack of spiritual awareness than it does about you. And I hope that at some point we remember ourselves as this community of light in the light age, and that we all learn to work together and respect each other's paths, but also honor each other's paths, because each of us have come a long way. We have done many, many things across many lifetimes. We are finally coming to the end of a rather long and rather difficult journey, and it's time for us to come together instead of finding ways to be separated. So enjoy this week's newsletter. I hope that you found this helpful. Again, if somebody shames you spiritually and tells you, oh, you didn't do that, you're not spiritual, you can remind them very nicely that your spiritual awareness and where you are in your spiritual path is between you and Source, or you and God, and it's none of their business. Thanks for watching. It's Jennifer Hoffman. Visit me at enlighteninglife.com. See you on the next video.